So let's just start by looking at the skies over the Middle East on the morning of March 1st.
Right, March 1st, 2026.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you were, monitoring a live flight radar dashboard that morning,
Yeah.
you would have witnessed this data anomaly that was so severe, it honestly looked like a system glitch.
It was completely unprecedented.
Unprecedented.
Yeah.
You have this incredibly dense, chaotic web of those yellow airplane icons, right? The ones that constantly track above one of the most critical commercial transit corridors on Earth.
Uh-huh.
And they just vanished. I mean, an entire region's airspace spanning multiple international borders in these highly contested zones, it just completely emptied out in a matter of minutes.
Which is, I mean, the sheer speed of that clearance is a testament to the scale of what was happening.
Yeah.
Because civilian air traffic control networks, they don't just shut down millions of square miles of transit airspace on a whim.
No, of course not.
Right. That level of instantaneous grounding requires military deconfliction protocols that just override the civilian infrastructure entirely.
It's a full takeover.
Exactly. And so what you had in place of those civilian airliners were the physical skies being overwhelmed by the streaks of low-flying projectiles.
Hugging the terrain.
Hugging the terrain, yeah. While air raid sirens are just activating in this massive cascading wave.
All the way from Tel Aviv, across the Arabian Peninsula, to Abu Dhabi.
Right. It was a profound structural rupture in the geopolitical order. Waking up that morning essentially meant waking up to a totally transformed world.
And that rupture is really the core focus of our deep dive today.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover.
We do. We're looking at a massive stack of source material. Specifically, we've been analyzing hours of these YouTube interviews featuring geopolitical analysts. And these are all dropping right now in early March 2026.
Fresh intelligence.
Right. And our mission today is to cut through the noise. We are bypassing the standard news panic, and we're just objectively breaking down the facts on the ground.
The strategies, the military doctrines.
Exactly. And obviously the global ripple effects of this current U.S.-Israel-Iran war.
Because the timeline here is critical for you to understand.
Yeah, set the stage for us.
So we are currently sitting in day 3.
Day 3.
Day 3 of a highly coordinated military conflict. And a conflict of this magnitude hitting day 3 means the initial operational plans, well, they've already collided with reality.
The theoretical phase is over.
Long over. We're looking at a massive U.S.-Israeli preemptive strike on Iran, which was immediately followed by a swift, unprecedented regional retaliation by Iranian forces.
And we really want to emphasize why this matters to you, the listener.
Because it's not just some distant geopolitical squabble.
No, not at all. This is an event that is actively dictating the price of your gas today.
Right.
It's dictating the stability of your stock portfolio and really the global balance of power for decades to come.
It changes the math on everything.
It does. So let's get into the catalyst, the match in the powder keg.
Operation Lion's Roar.
Right, the opening move. Operation Lion's Roar. Break down this initial U.S.-Israeli coordinated strike for us.
Well, Lion's Roar, and you might see it referred to in some of the leaked internal planning documents under older designations like White Valley or Midnight Hammer.
Okay.
This was designed as an overwhelming multi-domain strike. The target packages were vast.
Like a regime sites, right?
Regime command centers, critical military infrastructure, and crucially, the core nodes of their nuclear program.
Specifically, Nats, Fordo, and Isfahan.
Exactly. The tactical objective driving these selections was pure decapitation.
Decapitation, meaning taking out the leadership.
Right. The military planners in Washington and Jerusalem were operating on this doctrine aimed at eliminating the supreme leader and up to 49 senior Iranian political and military officials simultaneously.
49 senior officials in one strike.
That was the goal. And a parallel objective was the systematic destruction of the Integrated Air Defense System, or the IADs.
Because if you take down the IADs, you own the sky.
Exactly. You sever the command and control, you blind the radar networks, and you secure uncontested air superiority. Once you have that, you can dismantle whatever is left of the adversary's military at your leisure.
Which is, I mean, that's standard Western military doctrine, right?
Very standard. It relies heavily on the assumption that if you have a centralized hierarchical adversary, they will just collapse into paralysis if that top tier is suddenly removed.
Cut off the head, the body dies.
That's the theory.
And the rhetoric leading up to this from the U.S. administration, it was incredibly absolute.
Zero ambiguity.
Yeah. I mean, they framed this explicitly as a major combat operation to defend Americans, eliminate terrorist threats, and totally destroy Iran's missile industry.
And annihilate their navy.
Right, annihilate the Navy.
Mm.
And really, the unspoken but obvious goal was to spur regime change.
They essentially told the Iranian public, stay indoors, the bombardment will be severe, but a power vacuum is going to be waiting for you when it's over.
And they gave a timeline, too. They projected up to 4 weeks of continued conflict.
4 weeks. And they completely ruled out negotiations.
No diplomatic off-ramps whatsoever.
But the reality on the ground, as we're seeing in these Day 3 assessments, is starkly different from those expectations.
The decapitation strategy didn't quite work as planned.
It didn't, despite massive kinetic damage on leadership compounds, and there are highly credible reports that the interim successor to the supreme leader was killed.
Right, we saw those reports.
But despite that, the Iranian regime did not collapse into a power vacuum.
They maintained continuity of government.
They did, and they did it by utilizing deeply buried, hardened fiber optic communications.
So they completely bypassed the Western cyber neutralization efforts.
Exactly. They were prepared for the electronic warfare. And then if we look at the nuclear targets...
Natanz and Fordo.
Right. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has reported no immediate radiological leaks.
Which is a huge detail. If there are no leaks, the core infrastructure is probably intact.
Precisely. You can pulverize the administrative buildings on the surface all you want. But if the core subterranean centrifuge halls, which are buried beneath mountains and layers of reinforced concrete...
Right, Fordo is literally inside a mountain.
If those aren't physically breached, you haven't neutralized the nuclear program.
So the physical decapitation didn't trigger a collapse. But what about the political side? Because a big assumption here was that a shock and awe campaign would make the Iranian populace rise up.
Which was a severe miscalculation.
A total backfire.
It was. Instead of fracturing the country and causing a civilian uprising against the government, the strikes galvanized Iranian nationalism.
The classic rally round the flag effect.
Exactly. You have disparate factions, people who have spent years protesting this regime.
Protesting in the streets.
Right. And suddenly they are unified against what they universally perceive as colonial aggression. The strikes didn't break the regime's control. They handed them a unifying existential cause.
Okay, so the decapitation fails to paralyze the state. And that leads us to the counterpunch. Iran's response.
Right, which they dubbed True Promise 4, or The Account. And the most shocking part of this is the timeline.
The speed was staggering.
Because according to these geopolitical analysts, the U.S. and its allies were modeling a 10 to 12-hour delay, right? They thought Iran would need half a day to reconstitute command and control before they could respond.
Right. They assumed the decapitation strike would buy them 12 hours of chaos in Tehran.
But instead, missiles were flying within 45 to 60 minutes.
45 minutes?
How is that even possible if their central command is under heavy bombardment?
It's possible because of a military doctrine called mosaic defense.
Mosaic defense. Break that down for us.
So Western planners assumed Iran relies on a rigid, top-down authorization protocol.
Like the West does.
Exactly. But mosaic defense is a decentralized system. It empowers regional provincial commanders to launch independent strikes without needing central command.
So they don't even need to call Tehran.
No. Think of it like a starfish.
A starfish. Right. If you cut off the head of a traditional animal, it dies. But if you cut off a limb of a starfish, the limbs continue to operate autonomously.
Because the nervous system is decentralized.
Exactly. Iranian planners knew a decapitation strike was coming eventually, so they pre-delegated the authority to launch. If certain trigger events happen, like a massive U.S. strike, those provincial commanders already have their standing orders.
They just turn the key.
They just execute. And the targets they chose reveal a very aggressive scorched earth doctrine.
Yeah, because they didn't just aim at Israel in retaliation.
Not at all.
They launched a massive wave of missiles at the Gulf states, specifically targeting the states hosting U.S. military bases.
Which completely erases the line between primary combatants and logistical hosts.
Let's talk about those specific impacts, because they are massive. Starting with Qatar.
Al Udeid Air Base.
Right, Al Udeid gets hit.
Okay.
And the reports show they successfully disabled the CAOC.
The Combined Air Operations Center.
Which means what, exactly, for the U.S.?
It's a disaster. The CAOC is the central nervous system for the Allied coalition's integrated radar.
It's how they see the sky.
Exactly. It handles all the airspace deconfliction. If you blind the CAOC, Allied aircraft and defense systems have to operate in a fragmented way.
Which increases the risk of friendly fire.
Massively. And it decreases the efficiency of your interceptor networks because the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Okay, so Qatar is hit, the CAOC is down, and then there's Bahrain.
The U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet headquarters.
Right, the headquarters gets hit. And the analysts in these interviews explain that this causes a massive, very specific logistical crisis for the U.S. Navy.
The VLS reload issue?
Yeah, the vertical launch system. Explain how this works for the listener, because this is fascinating.
Okay, so the U.S. relies on these Arleigh Burke-class destroyers to shoot down incoming ballistic missiles, right?
Right. They provide the interceptor umbrella over the Gulf.
And these ships use a VLS, a grid of silos built into the deck of the ship, filled with interceptor missiles.
But it's a finite number.
Very finite. And once a destroyer burns through its VLS inventory, shooting down a swarm of cheap Iranian drones,
It's basically empty. Defenseless.
it is combat ineffective until it reloads. But here's the fatal flaw. You cannot reload those VLS tubes at sea.
Because the waves are moving the ship.
Exactly. You're trying to lower a massive, highly explosive missile into a narrow metal tube. You need stable infrastructure, specialized cranes, calm water. You need a secure deep-water port.
And Bahrain is that port for the Fifth Fleet.
It was. But with Bahrain's facilities hit or under constant threat of being hit, those U.S. destroyers have nowhere local to go to reload.
So what do?
Once their interceptors are spent, they have to retreat. They have to sail all the way out of the theater to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean or even back to Italy.
Which takes weeks.
And while they are transiting, the Gulf is left totally undefended. The umbrella is gone.
Which brings us directly to Section 3 of our deep dive. The vulnerability of the Gulf itself.
The economic hub's under fire.
Right. Because once that naval umbrella pulls back, you have immediate chaos in places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Cities that have branded themselves on absolute stability.
Exactly. And the analysts are pointing out that these relatively cheap Iranian drones and missiles are bypassing these incredibly expensive Western defense systems.
They're saturating the defenses.
Yeah. And they are hitting civilian and economic centers. There was that specific strike mentioned near Dubai's Palm Jumeirah.
Right next to the Fairmont Hotel.
The Fairmont Hotel. I mean, you have tourists and expats watching a ballistic missile impact from their luxury balconies. The UAE confirmed civilian casualties.
Falling shrapnel from interceptions is just as deadly.
And that triggers an instant expat crisis. We're talking about the human and economic toll in the UAE.
Because flights are immediately grounded, the stock market is halted.
And these analysts point out a specific demographic. The 4.6 million Indian nationals working in the Emirates.
The entrepreneurs, the logistics managers, the people who literally run the economy.
They're stranded. The airspace is closed. The reports describe people seriously considering hiring cars to flee across the desert into Oman.
Just to find a functioning airport.
It's an absolute panic. And it's not just the tourist hubs. It's the energy infrastructure.
Saudi Arabia's Ras Tanura refinery.
Right. Aramco's largest facility gets targeted.
Which sends a very clear message.
And that message leads to a profound psychological shift in the region.
What the analysts are calling the abandonment narrative.
The abandonment narrative. This is crucial. Break this down.
For decades, the Gulf monarchies relied on an implicit deal. They keep the oil flowing, and the U.S. military keeps them safe.
The ironclad U.S. security umbrella.
Right. But now, in a multi-front war, they are realizing that the U.S. and Israel have to prioritize.
And the Gulf isn't the top priority.
Exactly. The finite number of Patriot batteries and Houthi systems are being prioritized to protect the Israeli heartland and the core U.S. command nodes.
Leaving the Gulf's critical infrastructure exposed.
The Gulf monarchies are waking up to the fact that they're viewed as a buffer zone.
Which leads to this frantic diplomatic back-channeling.
Oh, absolutely.
The reports show the UAE and Qatar are privately lobbying the U.S. for a quick ceasefire.
Even while publicly condemning Iran.
Right, because publicly they have to act tough. But privately, they know their entire brand stability, luxury tourism, global commerce is being destroyed overnight.
Capital flight is instantaneous when investors see active war zones.
But the U.S. isn't in a position to just end it because they're facing their own crisis. The military attrition.
The munitions crisis? This is arguably the most shocking data point from the first 72 hours.
Yeah, let's look at the numbers here. The analysts highlight a staggering statistic regarding the Tomahawk cruise missiles.
The U.S. expended approximately 60% of its total global Tomahawk missile inventory.
60%.
In just 3 days.
I mean, that is That's an unsustainable burn rate.
Completely unsustainable. You have to understand, a Tomahawk isn't just an artillery shell. It's a multi-million-dollar precision platform.
You can't just mass produce them overnight.
No, it requires advanced microelectronics, complex supply chains. It takes years to build a significant stockpile.
And they burn through over half of it in a weekend.
Right, because they are fighting an asymmetric war. The U.S. is firing $3 million interceptors at $50,000 drones.
The math simply doesn't work for a prolonged war of attrition.
It doesn't, and the attrition isn't just munitions. It's the delivery platforms.
The aircraft. Which brings us to the fall of the F-15s over Kuwait.
3 U.S. F-15 Strike Eagles shot down.
Now, the reports are a bit murky on exactly how this happened.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate among the analysts.
Right. Was it enemy fire? Like, did advanced Iranian surface-to-air missiles survive the initial U.S. strike and take them down?
Or was it friendly fire?
Right. Panicked Kuwaiti air defenses looking at a saturated radar screen and making a tragic mistake.
But strategically, it almost doesn't matter which one it is.
Because the result is what they call a credibility kill.
Exactly. A credibility kill.
Explain that concept.
The F-15 is legendary. It has an almost flawless combat record. It represents Western technological superiority.
So losing 3 of them in one incident.
It shatters the aura of invincibility. It signals to the entire world that the airspace is uncontrolled.
That regional coordination among U.S. allies has descended into lethal chaos.
Right. Whether you're shot down by the enemy or your own allies, the reality is the same. The U.S. Air Force does not control the sky.
And that loss of control instantly bleeds into the global economy.
The economic shockwave.
Yeah. This is where we connect this geopolitical theater directly to your wallet.
The global war tax.
The war tax. Because even if your country isn't involved in this fight, you are going to pay for it.
Let's look at the immediate energy paralysis.
The numbers are violent. Oil spiked 20% almost instantly.
Hitting $83 a barrel.
Right. And the projections from these financial analysts, they're pointing toward $110 or even $150 a barrel if this drags on.
Which causes global stock markets to absolutely crash as algorithms price in the geopolitical risk.
But the physical driver of this spike is the choke points.
The Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed.
Which handles 30% of global daily oil production.
And the interesting part the analysts point out is that Iran didn't even need to sink a ship to close it.
No, the maritime insurance market did the work for them.
Right, because underwriters in London aren't going to insure a multi-million-dollar tanker sailing through a shooting war.
They either pull coverage entirely or raise premiums so high that commercial transit becomes financially impossible.
So the strait is sealed by risk,
Right.
And then you have Qatar halting its LNG exports.
Liquefied natural gas.
Right. They halt exports due to the regional volatility.
Which is an absolute catastrophe for Europe.
Europe is uniquely vulnerable here.
Yeah, because Europe spent years pivoting away from Russian piped gas. They are entirely dependent on seaborne LNG from the Gulf to survive.
And the reports show European wholesale gas prices shot up 40% immediately.
40%.
And the analysts warn that this energy vacuum threatens to collapse governments.
Specifically in France and Italy.
Right, because you have unsustainable cost of living increases. People can't heat their homes or run their businesses.
That leads directly to civil unrest. Fragile political coalitions can't survive that kind of inflation.
And it's not just Europe. The analysts spend a lot of time on India.
Indian paradox.
Yes, the Indian paradox. Explain how this $10 rise in crude oil crushes India.
India is trying to position itself as this rising neutral superpower, right?
Right.
But their economy relies on importing over 2.5 million barrels of oil a day from the Gulf.
So every time the price of a barrel ticks up by $10,
it adds a $15 billion burden to the Indian economy.
$15 billion, just to maintain baseline energy consumption.
It erases their economic growth overnight.
So you have this economic contagion spreading globally. Meanwhile, the physical war is expanding into what the analysts call the ring of fire.
The secondary fronts.
Let's start with Lebanon. Lebanon is on the brink.
Israel is heavily bombing Beirut.
Right. And mobilizing 100,000 reservists for a potential ground invasion against Hezbollah.
But the internal dynamic in Lebanon is even more dangerous.
Because the Lebanese government, under international pressure, has actually ordered the disarmament of Hezbollah.
Which is a completely unviable order.
Why?
Because the Lebanese armed forces, the official state army, is roughly 40% Shia.
And Hezbollah is the dominant force in that same community.
Exactly. So Ordering the army to forcibly disarm Hezbollah isn't a security solution. It's a catalyst for an immediate sectarian civil war.
The military would just fracture.
Right. The state doesn't have the power to enforce that decree.
Then you move south to Yemen.
The Houthi rebels?
The Houthis had a pause on their strikes, but the reports confirm they've abandoned that pause.
They are resuming full-scale attacks on Red Sea shipping and launching long-range strikes at Israel.
So the Red Sea remains totally unviable for logistics. And over in Iraq.
Iraqi airspace is completely closed. It's just a missile corridor now.
And Iraqi resistance forces are actively attacking U.S. bases in Erbil.
And there's intelligence suggesting they are moving toward the Jordanian border.
Putting immense pressure on Jordan, a key Western ally.
But the most critical escalation, the one that really changes the map, is Cyprus.
Cyprus. The Iranian strikes on the RAF Akrotiri base.
This is a massive strategic message.
Because Cyprus is an EU member state.
And the RAF base is sovereign British territory, heavily used by NATO and the US.
So why hit Cyprus? What's the calculation there?
Iran is intentionally shattering the European illusion of geographic immunity.
They're establishing a red line.
Exactly. The message to London, Paris, and Berlin is, if you let the US use your territory to launch jets against us, you are no longer off limits.
Your territory will be targeted.
Right. It's a psychological operation designed to fracture the NATO alliance by bringing the physical threat directly to European soil.
So we're looking at all these expanding fronts, the munitions crisis, the economic shockwaves, and it all points to one massive conclusion that the analysts agree on.
The geopolitical pivot.
The definitive end of the old order.
The Sykes-Picot map is dead. Unipolar U.S. hegemony in the Middle East is dissolving in real time.
And as the West exhausts itself in this war of attrition, there are silent beneficiaries watching from the sidelines.
The multipolar axis, specifically China and Russia.
Let's look at China first.
Yeah.
Because the intelligence shows China anticipated this whole conflict.
They did. For months before the strikes, Beijing was aggressively stockpiling Iranian crude oil.
Buying it up at a discount.
Exactly. So when the price spiked 20%, China's domestic economy was insulated from the shock.
But they aren't just passively watching.
No. China is actively neutralizing the U.S. intelligence advantage by providing Iran with direct access to the Beidou navigation satellite system.
Their alternative to GPS.
Right. And they're sharing high-resolution satellite data. So Iran can execute precision strikes without China ever formally entering the war.
They're fighting a proxy tech war.
Exactly.
And then there's Russia.
Moscow is profiting immensely.
Because of the oil prices.
The massive spike in crude prices floods the Russian treasury with cash, funding their own operations.
But the analysts report they're also quietly providing technical assistance to Iran.
And specific hardware. There are reports of Mi-28 attack helicopters being transferred.
So Russia and China are gaining massive strategic ground while the U.S. burns through its tomahawks.
And they're also building parallel infrastructure.
The Golden Corridor.
Right.
Because with the Suez Canal defunct for commercial transit due to the Red Sea attacks and the Strait of Hormuz closed,
global trade has to reroute.
And the Golden Corridor is the alternative. Break down what this route actually is.
It's the Russia-Iran-India trade route. It uses rail networks and secure maritime routes across the Caspian Sea to bypass U.S.-controlled maritime choke points entirely.
It's a sanctions-proof artery.
Designed specifically for a multipolar world. It physically shifts the center of global commerce away from the West.
So to summarize what these analysts are looking at just 3 days into this conflict, a decapitation strike completely backfired, triggering a decentralized, scorched earth retaliation.
Western military assets are rapidly depleting.
The global economy is paralyzed by a massive energy shock.
And long-standing Middle Eastern alliances are fracturing.
It's a staggering shift. But before we sign off, there is one final, incredibly provocative thought that these analysts bring up.
The terminal trajectory of this attrition.
Right, because as the conventional military capabilities of the U.S. and Israel face this severe exhaustion, as the logistical deficits pile up in a protracted war, you have to ask, what happens to the rules of global engagement?
When conventional deterrence fails entirely.
Exactly. If an exhausted power is pushed to the brink, unable to halt the relentless incoming fire from these decentralized swarms.
Should they be pushed toward the use of tactical nuclear weapons?
Just to instantly vaporize the subterranean complexes and force a stop to the conflict?
It's the ultimate nightmare scenario.
And if that threshold is crossed, how quickly do Russia and China step out of the shadows and directly onto the battlefield?
The observing superpowers wouldn't stay observers for long.
It's a chilling concept to ponder long after this deep dive ends. Thank you so much for joining us on this analysis. We encourage you to stay informed, critically evaluate the fast-moving news cycle, and keep questioning the broader implications of these historic shifts.
What was supposed to be a surgical strike, something meticulously planned to reshape the Middle East, has instead lit the entire region on fire. Over the last 48 hours, we've all watched a simmering conflict just explode. And it's sending shockwaves right through global energy markets, international shipping, and the very foundation of our geopolitical world. So how did we get here? Let's break it down. To really get a handle on this crisis, you have to look at the sheer speed of it all. This wasn't a slow burn. This was a detonation. It kicked off before dawn on February 28th with Operation Lion's Roar. Just 1 hour later, Iran hit back. 3 hours in, the entire Persian Gulf is a war zone. By the 6-hour mark, the skies go dark as country after country shuts down its airspace. And in less than 24 hours, the global economy felt that first major jolt as oil prices went through the roof.
Okay, so it all started with this one massive military operation, Operation Lion's Roar. This wasn't some minor skirmish. No, this was a huge, coordinated move meant to fundamentally change the balance of power. So let's dig into what this thing was really all about. So the official goal, what they told the world, was that this was a decapitation strike. The idea was to go in, surgically take out Iran's senior leadership and its key military sites. And the thinking behind it was, if you do that, you create this power vacuum, the regime collapse, and boom, you've neutralized a major threat to U.S. and Israeli interests in one clean shot. But the reality? It seems this was based on a massive, massive miscalculation. The operation completely underestimated Iran's military resilience, its ability to take a punch and immediately hit back, hard. So what was planned as this pinpoint, targeted strike has now become a raging inferno across the entire region. So how did they justify this? Well, the reasons they gave were pretty clear-cut. First, stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Second, get rid of what they called imminent threats. And they also pointed to a long history of hostile actions, everything from the 1979 embassy hostage crisis all the way up to recent attacks by proxy groups on American soldiers and on Israeli citizens. Iran's retaliation, though, it wasn't just fast. It was practically a textbook display of a military that was ready for this exact scenario. Instead of being paralyzed, their counterattack was launched with, frankly, shocking speed and precision. So how on earth did they respond so quickly? Well, the answer is this strategy called decentralized mosaic defense. Basically, it gives regional commanders the green light to act on their own. So even if central command gets hit, the system keeps working. That's how they launched a response in just 45 to 60 minutes. I mean, compare that to past crises where it took them 10 to 12 hours to respond. It's a total game changer. And their economic playbook was just as brutal. They followed what's being called a scorched earth doctrine. Step 1, any country with a U.S. base is now considered part of the fight. Step 2, that means their energy infrastructure, their refineries, their gas plants, their ports are now fair game. And step 3, hit those targets systematically to inflict as much economic pain as humanly possible on your opponents and their allies. And listen, this thing wasn't contained for a minute. It spilled across borders almost instantly, becoming this multi-front regional war. The first strikes were just the opening move in a chess game that has now set the entire board on fire. One of the most powerful visuals of this whole thing is looking at the flight radar maps. Where you'd normally see hundreds of planes, there was just nothing. A massive, empty void over the region. That shutdown of civilian air travel was this stark, immediate sign that the entire region was on an emergency footing. And the flashpoints just kept erupting, one after another. You had missiles hitting near Dubai and Abu Dhabi, shutting down those huge airports. Saudi Arabia's biggest refinery got hit, proving it wasn't safe. Qatar had to stop its natural gas exports, which is a huge deal for Europe's energy supply, all while Israel is calling up reservists for a possible fight in Lebanon, and Houthi forces start hitting ships in the Red Sea again. It was just chaos everywhere. And this is exactly why this matters to every single one of us, no matter where you live. This stopped being just a regional problem almost instantly. It immediately triggered a massive global economic shockwave that is now hitting every major economy on the planet. The first place everyone felt it, the wallet.
In just 2 days, crude oil prices shot up by a staggering 20%. And analysts are saying, look, we are on a fast track to over $100 a barrel, maybe even $110 in the next few weeks. And the reason why is pretty simple. The Strait of Hormuz, that critical bottleneck for the world's energy supply, is now effectively shut down. That single act has taken almost a third, 30%, of the world's daily oil supply completely off the market. Think about that for a second. That's an unprecedented supply crisis. But this whole thing has a very real human face, too. Take the UAE. There are nearly 4.6 million entrepreneurs there, a huge number of whom are Indian nationals, and they're like the engine of that economy. Right now, they're just stranded. They can't leave. The country's travel hubs, its financial centers, they're all grinding to a halt. People are already calling this a war tax on the entire world. For a country like India, every $10 jump in the price of oil costs its economy another $15 billion. That is a heavy burden that every family, every business in every country is now being forced to pay. So the final consequence, and maybe the one that's going to last the longest, is this fundamental shift in the entire geopolitical landscape. Analysts seem to agree on one thing. What we're watching right now is not just another conflict. It's the violent, messy end of an entire era in the Middle East. You see, the old order was pretty simple. It was American-led security. The U.S. was the undisputed protector of the Gulf states. But this crisis has completely shattered that idea. Now, we're rocketing into this new multipolar world, where countries like China and Russia and other regional players have way more say, and new trade routes are popping up to get around those old Western-controlled choke points. And this really sums it up. The old rules are just gone. The era of American military dominance in the region is over. New rules are being written as we speak, not in Washington, not in Europe, but by the rising powers in Asia and by the local powers in the region itself. So, when you boil it all down, this conflict, no matter how it ends, has permanently changed the global math. That old security umbrella over the Gulf has been completely torn to shreds. And it leaves us with one final, really provocative question. With the old order shattered into a million pieces, who gets to draw the maps of the new Middle East?